Soulforce.
In 1998, Mel White and Gary Nixon, with a handful of friends, set out to confront homophobia in the church. Since then, over 10,000 people have been trained in the Soulforce principles of truth, love, and nonviolence. We invite those committed to justice for God's gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender children to join in this celebration of what we have done and to join on the journey for what we must continue to do. In October 1999, Soulforce journeyed to Lynchburg, and 200 volunteers met with members of Jerry Falwell's Thomas Road Baptist Church to begin a dialogue. Though members of Fred Phelps' family were on hand with unwelcoming signs, the members of First Christian Church of Lynchburg welcomed us warmly.
Dying. And we forget that. We forget that in this avalanche of hate, it buries the little ones.
People like Matthew Shepard, beaten to death last year in Wyoming because he was gay.
Just 3 weeks after the Lynchburg event, we attended the trial of Jimmy Creech, who had served faithfully in the United Methodist Church for a quarter of a century, yet was on trial for conducting a same-sex holy union. Jimmy said he had felt compelled to break this unjust law as an act of conscience. As jurors arrived for the trial, we blocked the entrance and were arrested for trespassing. At the trial, Jimmy refused to put up a defense and was quickly found guilty. In February 2000, we marched on the Fox Family Network headquarters in Los Angeles, hoping to persuade it to stop carrying Pat Robertson's anti-gay rhetoric. Protesters closed down the network headquarters for more than an hour. Shortly thereafter, Fox sold the network. In Cleveland in May, during the United Methodist Church General Conference, we heard rousing songs.
This far to falter, this far to falter. I will not rest, I will not rest until I'm free.
We heard stirring speeches by Yolanda King, Mohandas Gandhi's grandson Arun, Reverend Jim Lawson, and Mel White.
Our enemies are not those bishops. Our enemies are not those delegates. Our enemies is an untruth that has captured their hearts. It's time we escalate this conflict non-violently to a place where we will not acquiesce any longer to injustice. God loves gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people, and she will not remain in the church where all her children are not welcomed. We are fighting for the soul of the United Methodist Church. We are bringing renewal to the United Methodist Church. We are bringing truth to the United Methodist Church.
We stood in vigil lines for hours, and more than 190 people were arrested for civil disobedience, including Arun Gandhi and 2 sitting United Methodist bishops. In June, we were in Orlando, Florida, for the annual convention of the Southern Baptist Church, the nation's largest anti-LGBT denomination. As we blocked exits to the convention, dozens were arrested and spent 2 days in jail. 2 weeks later, 200 people took part in a rally outside the Presbyterian General Assembly in Long Beach, California, calling on the church to welcome all people to the table. Among those arrested were an 83-year-old elder and 2 former moderators of the General Assembly. Our protest at the 73rd General Convention of the 2.5 million member Episcopal Church USA began as a 4th of July picnic in the park and ended with a peaceful civil disobedience that resulted in the arrests of more than 70 Soulforcers.
I feel like going on.
In November, more than 250 people joined together at the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. to protest Catholic Church policies toward LGBT people.
Open wide the door.
Over 100 protesters were arrested and fined as they blocked the driveway to the National Shrine. Among them were Fran Taft, the 95-year-old grandmother of a gay man and distinguished pastor and civil rights leader, Dr. William Sloane Coffin. In the fall of 2000, volunteers from Soulforce and other Lynchburg churches partnered with Habitat for Humanity to build a Habitat house there. The house was completed in December 2000. 24 Soulforce and Dignity USA volunteers flew to Rome in January 2001. For 3 days, they stood vigil with gifts for 3 different projects: an orphanage, a hospital caring for people with AIDS, and a battered women's shelter, waiting for a representative of the Vatican to come out and bless the gifts. However, no one came. While there, we gathered for communion, told our stories, and sang songs. As the purpose of the vigil was explained, many in the surrounding crowd joined us in a circle of prayer. In June, for the second time, Soulforce called for protests at the Southern Baptist annual meeting in New Orleans.
We are here to hold the Southern Baptist Convention accountable for the spiritual violence.
The action included a classic New Orleans jazz funeral. Crowds lined the streets as hundreds followed a jazz band to the Superdome, mourning the suffering and deaths of gay Southern Baptists, carrying a coffin filled with letters from those hurt by their teachings. More than 30 protesters were arrested for trespassing when they attempted to take the coffin into the Superdome. In August, we joined with Lutheran groups to spotlight inequality within the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.
A peaceful protest outside the Lutherans' convention ended in the arrests of about 50 people. The demonstrators want the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America church-wide assembly to make a decision now on ordaining non-celibate homosexual clergy.
Gays and lesbians in committed relationships are still banned from ordination. For 4.5 days in November 2001, we stood vigil outside the hotel in Washington, D.C., where the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops were meeting.
Now tomorrow and the next day we must see the bishops through God's eyes.
Braving the cold November winds, giving a face and a name to suffering because of the discriminatory policies of the church. The 2002 annual Southern Baptist Convention was held in St. Louis in June. As in previous years, we stood in silent vigil outside the hall where the meetings were held.
The Bible supported slavery. Now they tell us the Bible supports discrimination against God's gay children. Lest we forget.
A dozen Soulforcers entered the convention center and walked 2 by 2 onto the meeting floor to protest anti-gay Southern Baptist teachings and were arrested. 38 more were arrested as they attempted to enter the building as hundreds of supporters stood in solidarity. Early in the year, Mel White and Gary Nixon moved into a small house directly across from Falwell's Thomas Road Baptist Church. The house became a refuge for gay and lesbian students at Liberty University and a rallying point for the community. In October, hundreds of people converged on Riverside Park for Out and About in Lynchburg.
First ever Pride event in Lynchburg, Out and About in Lynchburg.
You are beautiful. Say it, I am beautiful. We were born with special spiritual gifts. Gay and lesbian, bisexual and transgender people, you are the hope of this nation.
In November, we gathered for our third action at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. During the Bishops' Mass, 3 faithful Catholics were denied communion, leading them to seek communion the next day at the hotel where the bishops were meeting. They were once again refused, and the 3 were arrested for trespassing and taken to jail. In April 2003, the Cincinnati Presbytery tried Reverend Stephen Van Kuyken of Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church for marrying same-gender couples. Despite Soulforce support, Reverend Van Kuyken was found guilty and defrocked. However, he was vindicated a year later in May 2004 when he won an appeal of his conviction. In June, we gathered in Phoenix for the annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention. A rousing songfest on Tuesday night brought an amazing response from Southern Baptist youth, many of whom came out of the meeting and joined the singing, walked the vigil line, and chatted with us. In August, we were again a visible presence at the ELCA's church-wide assembly in Milwaukee, attending at the request of a number of inclusive Lutheran organizations and standing vigil both outside and inside the hall. In October, Soulforce sponsored Lynchburg's second annual Pride Festival. The next day, volunteers stood in prayerful vigil outside the Thomas Road Baptist Church, while Reverend Jimmy Creech blessed couples and families at the home of Mel and Gary directly across the street. With relentless determination, we vigiled at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops for a fourth time in November. Although a few bishops ventured outside the hall to talk with us about their concerns, the majority refused to meet or dialogue throughout the 3.5-day vigil.
Do not let this trial take place. Bishops, jurors, church council, please go home. You don't have to do this.
We went into action at the March 2004 trial of United Methodist pastor Reverend Karen Damon in Washington State. Over 100 Soulforcers and other people of faith blocked the entrance to the church where the trial was being held in a nonviolent attempt to stop it.
The person having authority over these premises has requested your removal for blocking the entrance to the church. You must leave immediately. Continuing to block the entrance will result in your arrest for trespass.
A jury of 13 pastors decided in favor of Reverend Damon, stating that they had found her not guilty after many hours of painful and prayerful deliberations and listening for and to the Word of God. We were also at the 2004 United Methodist Church Conference in Pittsburgh. Delegates once again reconfirmed their stance that homosexuality is, quote, incompatible with Christian teaching. During the meeting, approximately 400 LGBT people and allies from inside and outside the denomination joined in a peaceful protest inside the convention center that stopped conference proceedings for 20 minutes. Hundreds left the bleachers to join in the protest, and many delegates and bishops stood in their seats in support. For the 5th consecutive year, Soulforce tried to change the hearts and minds of the Southern Baptist Convention in June. We gathered in Indianapolis to empower LGBT people to stand against their own oppression, and we distributed a 48-page study guide geared towards Southern Baptist youth, entitled Christian Youth, an Important Voice in the Present Struggle for Gay Rights in America. In our 5th consecutive year confronting the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, we issued a national call for prayer and vigils. During the week before we stood in silent vigil at bishops' meetings in Washington, D.C., related actions took place in a host of cities from coast to coast. Representatives attended a peace mass, which was attended by seminarian and ex-judge Mildred Edwards, who had retired as a judge after refusing to sentence the DC-3 the previous year. In December, our rapid response team went to the trial of United Methodist minister Reverend Beth Stroud, opposing the trial as an act of spiritual violence. On May 1st, 2005, almost 1,000 people braved cold, snowy Colorado winds to confront James Dobson and Focus on the Family for their false claims about LGBT people. Soulforce sent out a May Day alert, challenging the misinformation that flows to millions of people daily through James Dobson's broadcasts.
Cindy received word this week that her 28-year-old nephew Mark hung himself. He was a gay man. Mark's suicide note addressed to God read, "I don't know how else to fix this. It has to be fixed here at Focus, who are saying we are beasts, that our agenda is to destroy, recruit, molest children, that we're the worst threat this country has ever seen. The lies, the polluting, toxic lies are taking lives. And today, we come to love you and to set you free.
Resistance.
This is what it means to be a family. Focus on the family does not focus on families. They teach from a theology that is morally bankrupt, and it blinds society. It teaches people to reject their gay sons. It teaches fathers to reject their gay sons. It teaches mothers to reject their lesbian daughters, and it has to end.
Resistance.
I will refrain from violence of fist, tongue, and heart.
Focus on the Family shut down their campus to keep LGBT people from entering.
Oh, shine on over the whole wide world. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine on over the whole wide world. I'm gonna let it
When Soulforce's youth director Jacob Rayton and his parents attempted to deliver a letter to Dobson, they were arrested for trespassing.
I'm a Christian. I love my family. And every day my family is assaulted by Dr. Dobson. We're going to deliver this letter to Dr. Dobson. It has to stop.
Folks, I'll have to ask you to stop there then. You are under arrest for trespassing. I'd ask that you separate yourselves, please.
In 2005, we again attended the biennial churchwide assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America in Orlando. When delegates voted to keep their ban on ordination of LGBT people, 100 protesters walked silently to the front of the hall and turned to face the assembly of over 1,000 voting members, standing quietly for more than 2 hours, refusing to leave. In January 2006, the mantle was passed as Jeff Lutz became executive director of Soulforce and Mel White took the role of president of the board. Jeff became responsible for the day-to-day affairs of the growing organization, while he and Mel share responsibility as main spokespersons. Under Jeff's leadership, the organization has doubled in size in just 2 years, and young adults have been empowered to engage in youth-driven and youth-led activities around the globe with the founding of Soulforce Q. The Soulforce Equality Ride began in the spring of 2006 as 34 riders spent 2 months traveling to 19 Christian and military schools that discriminate against openly gay students.
Let's keep riding. Let's keep riding while there's good to be done.
The ride forced school administrations to respond directly and publicly to their stances on LGBT issues. Riders' refusal to accept no for an answer from schools that told them not to come forced conversations at these institutions. During their 2 months on the road, they spoke of faith, politics, and LGBT rights to over 10,000 young Christians and cadets. Hundreds of students met an out gay person for the first time. The Equality Ride was a critical educational experience for the youth who will become tomorrow's leaders at their schools, churches, and communities.
Do you want to say anything about the inspiration behind that song?
I wrote it because music's kind of like the best thing that I could give, and I am just extremely proud of how successful and how wonderful the Soulforce Ride has been for MNU, as far as just opening the discussion and just the social spiritual progress, socio-spiritual progress that has occurred because of your group's presence on my university's campus. And I think so many lives are going to be richly rewarded because of what you've done, that I decided to capture that in song. And I think I'll keep it around. Thank you all very much.
Many blessings to you, JJ.
In mid-July, families from across America began a week-long march from the Colorado state capitol in Denver to focus on the family headquarters in Colorado Springs. The march highlighted the links between the false rhetoric that flows from James Dobson and the assault on civil liberties of same-gender families. Actor Chad Allen and Matthew Shepard's mother, Judy, delivered a family album to focus on the family officials. In 2006, Soulforce started the Focus on the Facts campaign. Focus on the Facts initially concentrated on Focus on the Family, including sit-ins at their headquarters, but later broadened to include direct action and civil disobedience elsewhere.
We feel really good about what was done today. We feel like our mission was accomplished and a seed was planted. So,
at the same time, we are going to continue time and time again to say the rhetoric is harming the families that you profess to value, and that's not okay. When you tell untruth, we're going to stand up and say no more.
And don't ask, don't tell, because it's unjust and it's wrong. A soldier just returned from Iraq, and he said, I want to stay in the service, but I'm gay and I've got to be honest. I'm sure they're going to discharge him, and that's just wrong. So would you pray for us, Ken, that God can just move on our folks, and somehow people in Congress and this administration will begin hearing us, and in the Pentagon, so we can do right for all of America's service members.
In the fall of 2006, our young adults joined in the call for an end to Don't Ask, Don't Tell with the Soulforce Right to Serve campaign. Most Americans now believe the ban should be lifted, that gay and lesbian soldiers should not have to lie on a daily basis just to follow their hearts in serving their country. Soulforce Q young adults are showing America the inherent, baseless discrimination of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in a way that only youth can, by going into recruitment centers and actually trying to sign up as an openly gay enlistee.
It's outrageous. I'm turned down because I was born gay.
Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Om.
In March and April 2007, 50 equality riders in 2 buses traveled to 34 Christian colleges to dialogue with tomorrow's conservative leaders.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Haven Herron, spelled Haven, Herrin. I am co-director of the Soulforce Equality Ride westbound bus with Alexei Bulakov. 25 young adults on a bus to have a conversation with the students, faculty, and administration at Brigham Young University about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender lives.
Love inside of my heart, love and only love is moving me. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Om. Joy inside of my world, love and only love is moving me. Joy inside of my world, love and only love is moving me. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Om.
They were welcomed at some and threatened with arrest at others, but they were not deterred from bringing their message of hope to all. In June, during Exodus International's Ex-Gay Conference in Irvine, California, Soulforce held an Ex-Gay Survivors Conference. Survivors of so-called conversion therapy had an opportunity to discuss their experiences. Former Exodus leaders issued apologies for the isolation, shame, fear, and loss of faith that their attempts at changing sexual orientation had brought on. In July, Soulforce Q took its Right to Marry campaign to New York State. In mid-July, 40 young adults gathered in Albany before embarking on a journey to speak with state legislators and their constituencies about marriage equality. They crisscrossed New York State over a 2-week period in support of same-sex legislation passed by the State Assembly in June. In October, along with Atticus Circle, Soulforce sponsored 7 straight nights for equal rights. 32 different organizations conducted 38 vigils in 26 states over a one-week period, giving straight Americans the chance to do justice and motivating our allies to stand up for equal rights for LGBT people. Soulforce partnered with such groups to bring this message of hope to the entire nation. In 2008, Soulforce celebrates a decade of relentless nonviolent resistance. Now the work continues as we set our sights on the future with new opportunities, exciting possibilities, and the addition of a dynamic movement of young adults we've proudly named Soulforce Q. We do not look ahead naively. We know that those opposed to equality will continue to use religion-based misinformation to dehumanize our community and discriminate against us. But together, we can and must be unwavering in our resolve to expose and resist the untruths perpetuated by religious leaders and politicians. Our success depends on you. We need your time, your talents, and your financial support to reach our goals. Won't you join us?
We promise you that you will change, that something will happen in your heart and mind that will make a big difference.
Moving on from this fine day, you will all be remembered. We wish you all the love allowed. Return with a hero's welcome, but first, let's keep writing. Let's keep writing while there's good to be done. Let's keep writing. Let's keep writing while there's good to be done. Let's keep writing. Let's keep writing while there's good to be done. Let's keep writing. Let's keep writing while there's got to be shown.
Soulforce.
It can't start across the country or start with someone else. The freedom that you're seeking begins with yourself. Just think of what it would be like if we could all unite and walk hand in hand together instead of letting go. To fight, I stand for love, I stand for truth, I stand for hope, and I stand for you I stand for